Okay, welcome. We're going to talk about aluminum wiring here. If you live in London, Ontario, and you have a house with aluminum wiring, probably you're one of 15,000 houses. The Government of Canada estimates that between 1965 and 1979, they wired houses in Canada with aluminum wire, and there's probably 450,000 of them in Canada. In London, we assume that maybe there was 30,000 houses built between 1965 and 1980, and if half of them were built with aluminum wiring, then we got about 15,000. So the good news is you're not alone. The bad news is you may very well be getting some grief from your insurance company, the people that want to buy your house, or if you're selling your house, the people that are going through your house. Home inspectors will be picking on this a little bit. So let's talk about your options. I'm going to have Mike show you how it actually gets done in a little bit, but for this I want to tell you that you have some options. And there's a couple of options. Option number one is replacing all of the devices, the switches, the receptacles, with something called Kolar. And these are switches and receptacles that are specifically made and they're specifically marked for aluminum wiring. Now, don't be fooled. This receptacle looks very similar to this receptacle, and this one here is not rated for aluminum wiring, and this one is. So if you went to the Home Depot and you were buying a couple of boxes of receptacles, these ones are about $5 or $6 a piece, and these ones are in the 50-cent range. So most houses we go into, they've used the wrong receptacles or the wrong switches. These ones are just made for copper wire, whereas this particular receptacle and switch is just made for aluminum. So you have to be careful. In this particular house, the lady had a few problems with some switches and receptacles not working. We did a quick investigation, and the first thing that we noticed is she's got something called Decora switches. These are the paddle type switches, and typically they're not rated for aluminum wiring, although if they pigtailed the wires, the aluminum wires coming out of the house with copper wires, then they would be rated appropriately for that. And we'll see in a minute if she did. However, most houses that we go into, if they have done pigtailing, usually the homeowner or a handyman has done it, and they've used the morettes that they found at the store. Something like this. Ideal makes them. It's a great moret, although what they wouldn't have known is in small print here it says not to be used for aluminum wire. If they use the proper ones, they've got a couple of options. Moret, Thomas & Betts makes a moret, the ACS 65, which is good for aluminum wiring, and in very small letters here it says for aluminum wiring. Or as well, there's another type of moret Ideal makes, and it's actually a loaded moret, and you can't just tell by the color of the moret. You know, this particular one happens to be purple, this one happens to be blue, this one is black. You can't open up the receptacle or the switch plate and see that moret and know it's the right kind. You've got to actually take it out and have a very, very close look at it. So let's see what we've got here. We know that these switches are not rated for aluminum wiring, and the only way it would be a legal installation is if they've actually used the proper morets and connected copper to it. Most people, of course, don't know that. Rarely are electricians brought in for these types of jobs. And sure enough, they've just connected the aluminum wires right onto the terminal. So come on in here and have a closer look. You can see that they've done a pretty good job of the connections. And the thing they're missing is on the back side of this switch will be markings that said for aluminum wire only. So as I said, there's a couple of different things you can do. You can pigtail the wires. You can use the Kolar devices. In this particular case, this lady has opted for what we believe is the best solution. That's something called Copalum. And it's basically taking the aluminum wires that come out of the receptacle or the switch, connecting them to a copper wire, and then with the use of this Copalum tool, this big bad daddy, putting the connector in there, making a good firm connection, and then a piece of heat shrink tubing will go over top of that, and it'll be heated up, and the copper wire will allow us to put on whatever switch or receptacle the homeowner wants, and then it's a copper to copper receptacle connection. And in a few minutes, Mike's going to show you all of the ins and outs of how to actually do that.